I never thought two little girls selling flowers could completely shift the trajectory of my life. But that's exactly what happened. On an ordinary afternoon, in the middle of a hectic business trip, in a quiet corner of Rio de Janeiro, I was sitting alone at a tucked-away restaurant not far from the Copacabana shoreline. I had just closed a real estate acquisition deal that had taken weeks to finalize, and honestly, I was emotionally drained. My assistant had begged me to take the evening off, so I did, reluctantly. I was in my usual CEO uniform, tailored navy suit, watch that cost more than my first car, tablet in hand. My mind was still buzzing with market data and global figures. That's when they walked in, two little girls, weaving through the tables with tiny baskets full of fresh flowers. One held a small bouquet of roses, the other clutched a bunch of wild daisies. Their dresses were worn but clean, their hair tied up in neat braids. They couldn't have been older than 9. "Florist, senor?" the older one asked. "Flowers, sir?" I barely looked up from my tablet. "No, thank you," I replied automatically. But the younger one's soft voice stopped me. "It's for Mama. She's sick. We need to buy her medicine." That pierced through every layer of armor I'd built around myself in the years it took to reach the top. I looked up. They weren't begging. They weren't pleading. They were offering, proudly, quietly, with the poise of people who've learned to survive when the world barely notices them. I closed the tablet, leaned forward, and asked, "What's your name?" "I'm Lucia," said the older girl. "This is my sister, Alma." I paused. "How much for the flowers?" "Whatever you want to give," she answered with a kind of boldness that caught me off guard. I pulled out a 50 real note and handed it to her. She hesitated, then took it slowly, her eyes widening as if she had just seen magic. Alma gripped her sister's arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. "Obrigado," they said together, already turning to walk away. But I couldn't let them leave. Something inside me stirred, a memory I hadn't touched in years. "Wait," I said. "Would you sit with me for a moment?" They exchanged a glance. I motioned toward the empty chairs across from me. They nodded and sat, nervously fidgeting with the flowers in their hands. I ordered them something to eat, rice, chicken, fresh juice. They devoured the food as I gently asked questions. "Where's your father?" "Gone," Lucia said quickly, her tone matter-of-fact. "And your mother?" "She stays in bed a lot," Alma murmured. "She coughs and sometimes cries." Lucia added, "We sell flowers after school. We don't always make enough, but sometimes nice people help." I couldn't speak for a moment. These weren't just two little girls to me. They were a mirror, a painful, vivid reflection of who I once was. Because I used to be them. I grew up in Ajagunal, one of Lagos's most crowded and impoverished neighborhoods. My mom had asthma so bad, she would sometimes collapse while sewing clothes. I used to sell oranges by the roadside, yelling at passing cars under the blistering Nigerian sun. Every day was about survival. Every night was about hope. Now I sat in a 5-star restaurant, net worth in the billions, and it had taken 2 flower girls to remind me of the boy who sold fruit and dreamed of changing his world. After they finished eating, Lucia looked at me and asked, "What do you do, sir?" I smiled. "I help build things. Technology. Companies. I used to sell fruits just like you." Her eyes widened. "Really?" I nodded. "Really?" She stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe me. "I want to be an engineer," she said. "I want to build things too. And I want to be a nurse," Alma added shyly. "To help my mom." My heart twisted. These girls weren't just selling flowers. They were selling possibilities, fighting for a life bigger than the hand they'd been dealt. When they got up to leave, I gave Lucia a business card. She looked at it, confused. "If you ever need help with school or anything, call me." She clutched the card to her chest like it was gold. They left, vanishing into the crowd. But I didn't move. That night, I didn't go back to the hotel. I walked the city for hours. My head was full of spreadsheets, but my heart was full of stories. Their story. My story. I remembered why I'd started all of this. Why I'd worked 3 jobs in college, slept in my car some nights, built my startup with recycled code and borrowed bandwidth. It wasn't for status. It wasn't for Forbes lists or corner offices. It was to create change. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that. But those 2 little girls, they brought it back. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that meeting Lucia and Alma wasn't a coincidence. It was a calling. The next morning, I was on a mission. My driver picked me up at dawn, but instead of heading to another meeting or investor brunch, I asked him to take me to the neighborhood where Lucia and Alma might live. I had only one clue, the way they mentioned a school called Santa Rosa. It took a few calls and some help from local contacts, but eventually, I found the school, nestled between cramped alleys and leaning apartment blocks. The headmistress was kind but cautious. When I explained why I was there, she squinted at me like I was either crazy or trying to sell her something. "You're saying you met 2 of my girls in a restaurant?" I nodded. "Lucia and Alma. They sell flowers after school." Her face softened. "Ah, yes. Those girls are brave. Their mother has tuberculosis. They've been struggling since last year." I asked to speak with them, and after a few hesitant glances, she agreed. 15 minutes later, 2 small figures walked into the office, still in their worn uniforms, still carrying flower baskets. Lucia's eyes widened when she saw me. "You came." I smiled. "Of course I did." Alma ran up and hugged me. It hit me like a wave. "Girls," I said gently, "how would you feel if I helped with your mom's treatment? Got her the medicine she needs, maybe even some good doctors?" Lucia blinked. "But why?" "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing," I replied. "Because sometimes the right person at the right time can change everything." I spent the rest of the day organizing proper care for their mother, working with a private clinic I'd once donated to in Sao Paulo. By evening, we had her admitted. She needed rest, nutrition, and consistent medication. All of it handled. But this wasn't just about saving their mother. It was about what came next. I returned to my hotel room that night with one thought pounding in my head. There must be thousands more kids like them. Bright, hungry, full of untapped brilliance, just waiting for someone to notice. I didn't want to just throw money at a charity. I wanted to build a bridge between poverty and potential. I wanted to create a system, one that could find young minds like Lucia's and nurture them until they bloomed into engineers, doctors, scientists, creators. That's when the blueprint for the Bloom Initiative was born. I called my chief of staff at 2 a.m. "Clear my calendar," I told her. "We're launching something new." "A startup?" she asked groggily. "No. A revolution." I gathered a small team of trusted developers, educators, and community workers. Within a month, we had the first version of the platform, an online scholarship and mentorship portal specifically for underprivileged students in Latin America and Africa. It was built to be lightweight, mobile-first, and accessible even with low internet speeds. Kids could upload their grades, their dreams, even short video essays about their goals. Each story would be reviewed, and selected students would get full scholarships, laptops, mentorship programs, and community support. We funded the initial pilot ourselves. I didn't want outside investors. This wasn't a return on investment venture. It was a return on humanity mission. I named the first scholarship after Lucia and Alma's mother, the Clarissa Grant. She cried when I told her. But I wasn't just funding education, I was getting involved. I began visiting schools in remote areas, speaking to kids, telling them my own story, how I used to sleep on a torn mattress under a tin roof, how I almost quit university because I couldn't afford textbooks, how I coded my first app in an internet cafe on a shared computer. The kids listened with wide eyes, not because I was a billionaire, but because I had been them. And that made the dream feel reachable. Lucia, by now, had stopped selling flowers. She was excelling in school, top marks in math, curious about robotics. Alma had joined a weekend nursing club and spent time helping out at the local clinic where her mom was recovering. But they weren't the only ones. One boy from Bogota sent in a video explaining how he used broken radios to build battery-powered toys for his siblings. Another girl from Accra wrote an essay on how she wanted to build solar panels to power her village. Every application was a spark. And the Bloom Initiative? It was turning into a wildfire. Within a year, we had over 10,000 students enrolled across 12 countries. Partnerships began forming with top universities. Retired teachers volunteered to mentor online. Local governments took notice. For the first time in decades, I wasn't just building wealth, I was building legacy. At one point, a reporter asked me, "You're worth over $3 billion. Why not just enjoy your success and retire?" I smiled. Because what's the point of climbing to the top if you don't throw a rope back down? Wealth, I had realized, isn't just about comfort. It's a tool. A weapon against inequality. A lever to shift broken systems. And that lever was now in my hands. None of this had been planned. Not the encounter. Not the initiative. Not even the moment I decided to act. It had all started with a plate of rice, 2 flower baskets, and a pair of little girls with eyes full of quiet fire. They weren't looking for a savior. They were looking for a chance. And now it was my job to make sure they and thousands like them got it. I wish I could say everything went smoothly from there. That once the Bloom Initiative launched, the world opened its arms and ushered in a golden age of opportunity for underprivileged children. But real change doesn't come without resistance. The first blow came from the education boards in several countries. Foreign interference, they called it. They accused us of overstepping, of painting local systems as broken. All I had wanted was to supplement, not to shame. But bureaucracy, pride, and politics don't bend easily. We faced lawsuits in 3 regions. Some officials tried to ban our platform from being accessed in public schools. One education minister even accused us of indoctrinating children just because our mentorship program included character building and leadership courses. I sat in courtroom benches wondering if I had made a colossal mistake. My advisors urged me to back off, pivot the project into a tech nonprofit, and avoid direct involvement with schools. "You're a CEO," they reminded me, "not a revolutionary." But the faces of Lucia and Alma wouldn't leave me. I remembered the day I found out my own scholarship had been pulled because the funding dried up. I had to drop out of college for a semester and nearly never went back. A quiet death of potential. That was the enemy now, the quiet death of potential. I refused to let it win. So I doubled down. We adapted. Instead of working through government channels, we began partnering with community centers, churches, even soccer clubs. Anywhere children gathered, we showed up with tablets, books, and hope. We started mobile learning buses, refurbished from old delivery vans, fitted with Wi-Fi and solar panels. These buses became rolling classrooms, art studios, and science labs. And then something miraculous happened. The students fought for us. One video went viral. A 14-year-old boy named Theo from Nairobi uploaded a clip where he said, "Before Bloom, I was a shadow. Now I'm learning coding. One day, I'll build a system that can't be taken away." Within days, thousands of other students uploaded their own stories. The world took notice. Donations poured in. Celebrities endorsed us. Even a few governments quietly came around, offering discreet support. But it wasn't the recognition that moved me. It was the letters. Hundreds of them. Handwritten notes from kids thanking us for giving them shoes, food, school supplies. One child from Guatemala said, "Now I feel like I exist." That line stuck in my chest like a stake. At one point, my own company's board sat me down. "You're spending too much time and money on Bloom. Investors are asking questions. Share prices are fluctuating." I stood in silence, then said, "Let them fluctuate." I didn't become a billionaire by doing what was expected. Truth is, I was transforming too. I no longer felt energized in board meetings about quarterly growth projections or product launches. What moved me was seeing a classroom full of children using recycled laptops to solve real-world problems, building water filters, mapping safe routes through gang-infested neighborhoods, starting microgardens for their families. This was real impact. Not just numbers on a balance sheet, but lives. Futures. Ripples that would stretch far beyond my lifetime. One evening, a decade after our first scholarship, I found myself sitting at the very same restaurant in Rio de Janeiro where it had all begun. Same seat. Same quiet corner. But this time, the air felt charged with meaning. And then two young women walked in. Elegant, confident, smiling. Lucia and Alma. They were no longer little girls. Lucia was now completing her master's in engineering at MIT. Alma had become a public health officer in Sao Paulo, specializing in pediatric care. They had flown in to surprise me. We didn't speak much at first. We just hugged. For a long, tearful moment, nothing else mattered. Over dinner, Lucia told me how she was designing a sustainable irrigation system for dry regions in northeast Brazil. Alma had just returned from coordinating a medical outreach program in the Amazon. But what really made my heart swell was when Lucia looked me in the eye and said, "We're not the flowers anymore.
We're the gardeners now."
I nearly lost it. I excused myself, walked out into the night, and stared at the city skyline. All my wealth, my companies, my accolades, none of them had ever hit me the way those words did. We're the gardeners now. That's when I understood what legacy really means. It's not about having your name on a building or a foundation. It's about planting seeds so others can bloom long after you're gone. And the best part? Lucia and Alma had already started their own program, training young girls in STEM, giving out scholarships funded from their own salaries, mentoring the next generation. That night, we toasted to more than success. We toasted to full circles,
To growth.
to impact, to the power of a single act of kindness on an ordinary day. And as we laughed and shared stories, I thought back to the moment it had all begun. A simple, quiet dinner interrupted by two brave little girls selling flowers. They had no idea they were changing my life. And I had no idea I was stepping into the most meaningful chapter of mine. There's a strange peace that comes over you when you realize your life's greatest investment wasn't a company, a stock, or a building. It was a moment. A moment so small, it could have easily passed unnoticed. But I didn't ignore it. And because I didn't, everything changed. I now spend less time in skyscrapers and more time under trees. Less time in pitch meetings, more time in classrooms, villages, and places where dreams are fragile and precious. I've scaled back as CEO, transitioning into chairman of the board. My days are now filled with purpose, not pressure. People ask me, "Do you miss the game?" They mean the high-stakes negotiations, the billion-dollar decisions, the headlines. And sure, part of me remembers those adrenaline rushes. But I don't miss the game, because I found a bigger one. One with infinite levels, building people. And yet, I'm not here to glorify myself. The truth is, I stumbled into this. It was Lucia and Alma's courage that set everything in motion. I simply chose not to look away. Now, my mission is to help others do the same. We launched the Bloom Network, a global coalition of entrepreneurs, educators, artists, and changemakers who believe in giving more than they take. We mentor other CEOs on how to embed social responsibility, not as an obligation, but as a strategy for long-term relevance. Because here's a secret no one tells you at the top. Legacy outperforms luxury. I've watched billionaires build empires only to die with regrets no mansion could comfort. And I've seen kids with no shoes become leaders because someone gave them a pencil and a chance. Which one do you think matters more? Today, Bloom Initiative operates in over 40 countries. We've helped over 300,000 children access education, mentorship, and healthcare. We've established startup incubators for teens, turning ideas into action. We've connected remote areas to global classrooms. But the numbers, as impressive as they sound, don't move me anymore. What moves me are stories. Like a boy in Mumbai who built a rain harvesting system after his school's water dried up. Or a girl in rural Colombia who taught her mother to read, then opened a free library from their home. Or the student in Egypt who once sold trinkets on the street and now codes financial apps used by major banks. These are not isolated miracles. They are echoes of that one moment when I said yes to two little girls selling flowers instead of brushing them off like so many others had. And, if I'm honest, I often wonder what would have happened if I hadn't. What if I had kept my eyes on the steak in front of me? Or looked away when they approached, like so many other diners did that night? Would I still be a billionaire?
Probably.
But would I be this man? Absolutely not. Because all the money in the world wouldn't replace the warmth I feel when I walk into a school in Bangladesh and see my name scrawled on a thank you card taped to the wall. Not for being rich, but for showing up. Money doesn't change the world. People do. Money's just the amplifier. You choose what song it plays. Now, I choose songs of healing, empowerment, and hope. Years ago, I told Alma and Lucia they'd always have a place in my life. I meant it. They now sit on the board of Bloom. They mentor. They lead. They carry this vision even farther than I imagined. At our last summit, Alma stood before a crowd of 5,000 students, educators, and donors. She said something I'll never forget. The first time I held a flower in my hand to sell on the street, I thought that was all I'd ever hold. But now I hold data. I hold policies. I hold pens that sign scholarships for others. And I've learned the world doesn't need charity. It needs opportunity. Thank you for giving us that. The entire hall rose in applause, but I sat frozen.
Because those were my thoughts exactly.
We don't need more saviors. We need spotters, people who notice the ones no one else sees. People who invest in the overlooked, the underestimated. That's what I try to be now. A spotter, a planter, a believer. I still live in a beautiful home. I still drive a nice car. I still invest and advise and attend the occasional gala. But those things are accessories, not identity. My identity is now this. I am the man who said yes to 2 girls selling flowers. And I built a legacy from that yes. One final story before I end. Last year, I received an anonymous letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a pressed flower, fragile and yellowed by time. Beneath it, in looping handwriting, was this. You gave us more than money. You saw us. And when someone sees you, you start to see yourself differently too. Thank you. I showed it to Lucia. She smiled and said, it wasn't us who changed first. It was you. Maybe she's right. Or maybe we all changed together. In a world so obsessed with power, status, and performance, we forget that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is care. So the next time someone interrupts your dinner, before you wave them off or look away, pause. Look into their eyes. There might be a story there. A future. A revolution. A reason to bloom.